City Attorney.
Pete Peterson.
Ryan Yell, Planning Department.
Linda Lipsky, Merrifield.
Mike Abbott, sorry.
Robin Ward, Real Estate.
Mandy Honest, Clerk's Office.
Sonic Calhoun, Planning.
Christopher Constant.
Amy Dembowski.
Did you get you, Robin?
Yes.
Good morning.
Thanks, Alex.
And Alex.
Good morning.
Okay. Well, let's, first thing is the 2017-103 regarding the Merrill Field purchase. I guess, do you want to start?
Yeah.
Or do you want them to start, introduce their goals?
All right.
Okay, so why don't Alex, you want to talk a little bit about this? And
Sure.
Just give a quick overview. We should kind of have it at AM and so on, but Chris had some comments. We can discuss this amendment.
Okay. Good morning.
Have you seen this amendment?
Yes.
You did, okay.
Good morning. I'm going to pass, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the ELP, but I would like to pass this around. There's enough copies there for everybody. And also this is the aerial photo for the property, which is efficient, or which is the this is the acquisition. You guys some kind of hearing where it is. So basically, based on our current master plan, the FAA is supporting us to acquire property adjacent to the airport for compatible land use. So basically, it's willing seller, willing buyer in a way. So it's gonna settle down that we have properties like this, and FAA is encouraging us to buy this so that we have a compatible land use. And the last purchase we have was about 6 years ago, just north of this property, which is the Van House property. And they provided us grant to acquire those. And once we acquire those, we turn around and ask FAA for another grant to demolish it. And just a couple of blocks north of this property is the Van House property. And basically, it turns out to an open space, to an open green space. So the amendment yesterday that was proposed by Assembly Constant, we're in favor with that.
Yeah, in favor of that.
In favor with that.
We're done.
We're on the second thing. Go with yours.
Okay, then we get to go. Okay, well, so we had a brief review and they said that they're okay with your amendment.
Okay, and the neighbors who live nearby called me late last night and asked for a slight change. What they asked to do under the first sentence there is add where it says structures, including buildings and the retaining wall. There's a retaining wall in that section. They just want to have that retaining wall be considered part of the structure, because if the building is gone and the retaining wall remains, it will look like a former residential area.
Where would this be?
Right along the border of the property there, on Orchard Street.
No, I mean on your amendment.
Oh, it's I have it here. It's literally under the first, section 2, first sentence. It's after
Trees, structures,
trees and structures including.
retaining wall.
I still have them right now.
Yeah, my folks were Fairbanks
We're still in
Washington right now.
It's spotty, inconsistent.
I was like,
Correct.
You know, I was like, that's really odd.
Close.
It's in the crash zone for sure. And this big drop off in that spot.
It's a beautiful butt. It is outside of there.
So they say. It doesn't feel like it maybe when
No, I just, yeah.
Okay, so I don't waste running out to the car. The reason this came up is because that big green space there is an area of contention for the neighborhood, between Merrillfield and the neighborhood. And in the Merrillfield master plan, there is an intention to put in commercial buildings, basically where the snow dump is on DeBar there, across to the edge of the, where is it? Snow dump on the map. It's the snow dump right across to the south of Merrillfield. And then across Sitka Street, and basically forcing what they are now calling not a park off of that property and into the wetlands. And the neighborhood wanted to ensure that there are some protections, because I have these maps I want to show you, I have these plans. Back in 1982, before Merrillfield acquired that land, there was actually a proposed development, pretty substantial housing development, by an old timer named Ludwig Fairshade, who had scoped out and had professionally rendered and proposed a project to go into essentially that whole area before it became acquired and into parkland. And essentially he was denied by Mayor Knowles at the time, and they kind of cornered him into selling the property. They basically threatened him with eminent domain and said it's undevelopable. And so now, 25, 30 years later, 35, they're saying, and when I asked Mr. Bowers about this, his comment was, well, government makes mistakes. You know, we did take it telling him it couldn't be developed, but now we intend to develop it because we can. And so the whole purpose of this conversation is to lay the groundwork for any future potential mistakes that might happen because something isn't recorded. And I'm grateful for the support of this language from Mr. Bowers, because this will record the fact that the intent is green space here and not some future building site for a building when they decide it's in their better interest. And so, in this conversation that's been going on between the neighborhood and Merrillfield for how many years is that, since 82? You know, a long, long, long time. So, and these are the drawings to prove it.
Those are from 81.
82, actually, but yeah, Ludwig Fairshay's proposal to put 1,000 units of housing in that neighborhood, which obviously is not compatible with the runway.
Or the wetlands.
Or the
Saltfish habitat, or moose habitat.
At the time, it was different. You know, in 1982, this part of the city was different, and so, but yeah, it's not consistent with the wetlands or any other uses, in the opinion of the neighborhood. So, this is the beginning of a longer conversation, and I thank you for your support of this amendment. So, that's it.
Any thoughts from? So is this a park here?
It's quote green space. If you look at the little
snow dump.
Well, if you look at the little construction pad on the right-hand side of the property, approximately an inch to the bottom of the bar, that's what is known colloquially and by the signs, Sitka Park. But in the conversations now with leadership at Merrillfield, it's not a park, it's a green space, and basically their intent is to see that become a building.
It's always been called Sitka Park.
Right, well, not according to
And the neighbors that live there.
yeah, and it's a point of contention because for a lot of reasons, kind of folks would really like to see a connection to the Chester Creek Trail put in there so that this part of the town has access to the downtown. There's a trail that comes to the park and it dies. And you have to go up to Airport Heights and ride on Airport Heights to get to the trail connection. And so there are a lot of ideas for how this area might be better utilized. And from the neighbor's perspective, one of them is not putting in a medical plaza. Especially considering the history that the government took the land essentially from a private citizen who wanted to develop it, telling them it can't be developed. And now, in their long-term plan, they have the intent to develop it.
So in this area, near where this purchase is being made, there's a plan to put a medical?
No, down, just across, straight down towards the snow dump site, right? That whole snow dump and that line right up to the crash pad, the soft landing pad or whatever they call it.
So in this area here?
Right.
At Sitka Street Park and the playground, the
Right.
sledding hill.
Right, that whole area there. And then by logical extension, these properties becoming part of Merrillfield, then without some protection become under the same basic guidelines that, well, government makes mistakes and we can change our mind if we find a higher and better use of this land. And the neighbors who live in that area are concerned that they'll suddenly have a business building right in front of their view shed and a place where people come and sit and watch the moose walk by. It's one of the few riparian sections of the Fairview neighborhood, and it is unbelievably beautiful. You know, you look right into this greenbelt and then the whole Chugach mountain range. You can't even believe you're in the city when you're looking that way.
It's a great place for a home.
Right, well, you know, that would be an idea, but that wouldn't be within Merrill Field's purview. They would do something else if plans change over time. And so the purpose of
No, and when the land was acquired by Merrill Field in the 80s, again, it was then Mayor Knowles. This wasn't bought by the city.
Right.
It was bought by the airport with some combination of FAA money and a little bit of airport match. And it was bought for airport purposes.
Right.
That's the only way the FAA would allow you to buy it with airport money. In the near term and through now and for the foreseeable future, there is no need for that land to be developed for airport purposes. But it could be at some point in the future, and the FAA will require us, as they should, to consider airport uses for that. And one of which could be the generation of revenue that would support the airport, i.e. the MOB, medical office building style development. It's obviously very close to Alaska Regional and other stuff. But and obviously it was never a park in the sense of the municipal terminology. It has been used as a park, and the snow dump has been used as a snow dump. And we've been able, the FAA has been okay with that because there is not yet an airport need for that land. And the current master plan says that there is not a need for any redevelopment in the known future right now. But the FAA will not allow us to say that it'll never be used for an airport purpose. And so we're trying to walk a fine line right now between maintaining our commitments to the FAA, which funded the acquisition, and maintaining our commitment to the community to try to make this sort of southern portion of the airport property, you know, suit its neighbors to the greatest extent practicable. So, and just like the individual acquisition we're talking about now, the way I think we're interpreting this amendment to mean is that if another use for this Orca Street parcel was ever to be considered, the Assembly would have to act. So the airport could not, on its own hook, redevelop this differently than as described here, green space. But I don't want to mislead anybody. The only way the FAA will be okay with that is if they understand that the Assembly can't change its mind on that. It couldn't be done unilaterally by the airport, but it could be done with the Assembly's support, you know, 10, 20, 50 years from now. So we're not able, if we plan to use FAA money for it, we can make this commitment today, but just recognize that we're not capable of making, you know, this isn't like dedicating parkland or selling an easement or something like that, where we are losing control over the property either through a transaction or through something as strong as a park dedication. But it's the most we can do, and all credit to the FAA for being willing to consider this. I think we were somewhat surprised that they would even allow something like this in the near term. And I think that's a comment on their respect for Paul and Alex and others and their willingness to do this. So that I just want to frame this. This isn't dedicating it. This doesn't do anything. It does mean, however, that unlike most airport land, we could not change the management regime for this parcel without talking to the Assembly or getting the Assembly's approval, active approval in advance.
I would just add one thing that I differ with you on, that it's not that it doesn't do anything. What it does is it creates a formal record of the body of this conversation. And that is an important part of the conversation all the time. And that's what will ensure sure in the future that this is not just, oh, they changed their mind, they want to do something different now, that this was a deliberated decision now before us.
It would take
20
another
years from now
deliberated decision to
Right,
change.
another any given Tuesday that, there would be record. And that's what's important to me.
Just for the record, Assembly Council Dean Gates arrived. Pete, you had a comment?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, can I?
I was just going to ask, so you said it's not dedicated parkland, but is it designated to be parkland?
No.
No.
It is
Just
it
agreed.
is the airport's management choice, and our, potential permanent or long-term choice for the use of the land. But because of the FAA limitations, we can't say that it'll never be used as something other than its current use. But there's no immediate plans to change that.
And in addition to that, if this money is used to acquire this, if it is not used down the future, if we are going to use it for the building purposes, we have to reimburse the money that EPA gives us.
Right. And if we did want to make it a permanent park, we'd have to buy it. We'd have to figure out, the value of the land and then acquire it. Essentially buy it from FAA to do that.
Actually, I got a couple others around. Maybe you.
So I think we recognize that the assembly, just through an AO or whatever, we can change anything we've done in the past. But when I'm reading the amendment, section C, part C under section 2 says the parcel shall be maintained as undeveloped open green space for as long as Merrill Field operates as an airport. Does the FAA really realize that we can change that, or should there be a caveat in there saying something like, provided no future assembly action?
They've seen this language. I think Paul and Alex got their sort of tentative concurrence on this language, so I don't think any amendment or any change is required.
Okay.
And my only caveat, though, is that was verbally, and so they will have to review it, and concur in the
All
writing.
wrote
So it's
All wrote that language. I didn't write it.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, I understand it. And when I saw this, and we're talking about no future uses, I knew obviously maybe assembly could change it, but I just wanted to make sure they clearly understand. My second question is, so again, talk to me. We've been talking about the funding source, and I was reading, so I may have tuned you out a little, and I apologize. The funding source, we're thinking we're using FAA money for this.
Right.
And what kind of grant or how does that come about to the city?
Planning grants from FAA.
So typically, when there's a acquisition opportunity like this, and the property owners that are inside the airport boundary have typically all been contacted by the airport and said, hey, before you sell, give us a chance. And Mr. Sandoval, I don't know whether he approached us or how it came about, but he basically said, hey, I'm ready to go. And so at that point, we can initiate a transaction and then reasonably expect the FAA to essentially fund that transaction. And we won't actually execute. Am I missing this?
Correct. But he is 93 years old, and he's just waiting for us to acquire this property because he is going to have surgery in the next few days. So he's just waiting for us to give him the money so that he can move on.
Right. If for some reason the FAA did not approve the grant application to buy this, then we would essentially pay for it ourselves out of airport net income. But they've never done that before, and we've used this process many, many times. The most recent acquisition, I think, was City Electric.
Oh yeah,
City Electric. It's not on Orca Street. It's on Melchina, further into Fairview, 12th or something like that, right across the street from the elementary school. And that was when we did about 2 years ago, and it went the same way. City Electric came to us. They were closing as a business, and they said, hey, you want any of this? They had a lot more property, which we were only interested in the portion that fronted the airport, but we bought it a couple of years ago, and we're in the process of leasing it now. That's a different situation. That's commercial property, that can be put into an aviation-related use immediately. That is not the case with this.
Thanks. Dick?
On Blue Orchid Street, it's on the bar. We had a problem last couple of years with water drainage into the 115 bar from that area.
The water drainage was across, Mr. Training was across from that, but this property is on the hillside. The drainage property is on the north side of 15th, right on the border of 15th and the airport.
So it doesn't affect this property?
No, not at all.
This is a great piece of property at a lot of levels where if Mr. Sandoval chose to, he could undoubtedly sell it on the open market. The structure may not be salvageable, but it's essentially a view property. You know, it's on a bump. The anchorage, the whole bowl sort of drops about 30 feet below him to the east, and it has a great view of the Chugach Mountains and all of that. I can imagine on a sunny summer morning, it's a pretty nice place to be.
Or winter.
Okay.
I'm sorry you guys are concerned about his age, and I appreciate knowing he's 93.
Yeah.
If we approve this on Tuesday, then you guys can execute this immediately, or for the federal government's FAA to give us a
And then we'll apply to the FAA. Like I said, we're as certain as you can be about a federal decision-making process that they will fund the transaction fully, and with our minor match, 2%, 8%, whatever it is, and then away we'll go. You'll see that process come through. When the grant comes through, we will come back to you to appropriate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Robin?
I'm good.
Yeah, principal thoughts. There's no objection from the neighborhood about acquiring the project, especially on behalf of Sandy, who's a really great long-term resident of the neighborhood. The conversation is really kind of the tension between the neighborhood and the utility or the institution. I'm glad that Mr. Abbott brought up the City Electric building, because what the neighborhood sees happening consistently over time is that the appetite of Merrill expands, the boundary of Merrill expands, and it's expanding into the residential portions of the neighborhood, and that causes grave concern for people who have made their stake there. And it seems that the government entity always gets its way, and that's a concern. And now, of course, I find myself as the government, which is a neat scenario. But I am here to represent my neighbors and their concerns. And so just this action of providing this language into the code that states, or not into the code, into the code that says this is intended for green space, will create some confidence in the neighborhood that this relationship can work and we can find a common path forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So is this area what's called the glide path to the runway?
Runway protection zone.
Okay. So we actually, the airport at some point in time would like to acquire all of these properties since they're in that zone?
Correct.
There's one left, right?
Correct. It's Willie Sailor Willie Buyer.
We're not proposing a more aggressive approach at this time. The property owners are aware of our interest, and you know, I'm sure Mr. Sandoval's known about this for 50 years, and he's now taking advantage of it. And I don't know the name of the guy that owns the property to the north, but I think that's the last piece.
Van Haas.
No, there's
Oh, we acquired.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to Amy first.
I'm assuming, Robin, what did this come at for appraisal?
I didn't do the acquisition, Merrifield did their own acquisition, so do you know the appraisal amount? 255.
The appraisal came in at 255, but we're spending 400.
Yes, because there's environmental that needs to be done. There's an underground storage tank that needs to be removed. But during this application, it's all investigation. So part of this application that the FAA wants us to do is to make sure that there's some environmental that are going to be surprises later on. Because once this acquisition is done, we will turn around and ask for money to demolish it.
We may not need all 400,000.
Okay, yeah, because I'm trying to figure out if there's remediation to do of some extent, that's more cost on us, so.
And there will be.
If appraisal is 255 and we're spending 400, I don't really see how that's a good deal.
We're not going to spend we're not going to give Mr. Sandoval $400,000.
That's what I'm asking.
He's going to get 250 or whatever the number turns out to be.
We have hot
We're
flashes
gonna,
over
yeah,
here.
we're gonna
That's how much all of
give
it
ourselves a
costs.
budget
Okay.
of up to 150,000 more, give or take.
That makes way more sense to me.
Yeah,
To
that's
investigate.
demolition, contamination, remediation, that's.
Okay,
This is just the number that authorizes the assembly to accept the money from FAA.
you know, with remediation, that makes
Right,
sense,
right.
but I'm almost gonna have a stroke, so, thank you.
Quick clarification.
Yeah, thank you. I have a comment, but I wanted to know what stand up the AM on page 2 says do not exceed group pollution or heat, closing costs, appraisals, engineering, environmental study assessments, and administrative costs. That doesn't really say the remediation and maintaining that kind of thing. That doesn't seem inclusive of that.
It is not. That will be a separately funded item. This will help us know what needs remediation, what other actions will be taken, and then there'll be separate money sought for that purpose. The tree clearing, the tank removal, and whatever remediation is associated with the tank removal. So this will give us a chance to go look for asbestos and other stuff in the building, lead, paint, stuff like that, so that we then are able to make a more precise estimate of the actual demolition and clearing expenses. Like this issue of the retaining wall. That may well require some engineering to figure out how we're going to resolve that.
That environmental assessment will help figure out those unknowns and the initial cost.
There will be,
Whatever's needed.
because the demo is not included in this. So we will definitely, the final amount we seek from the FAA, whether in one or two chunks, will ultimately pay for all of it. And again, we have high confidence that the FAA will approve this. They have approved our master plan, which has said we want to buy that parcel. And they've approved that knowing it. So it's not fully pre-approved, but it's pretty much pre-approved. If we asked for $1 million to buy this property, they would balk. But because we have a independent value established, there's almost zero chance that they will not approve it. Merrillfield's a very attractive granting target. Between Paul and Alex, we have been very successful in seeking funding from FAA, both for property and other capital improvements at the airport.
I
Do we have a comment?
Mike answered mine. I just want to know how much you could get from the FAA. Mike answered that.
Yeah, we can certainly get the purchase price, and at that point we're committed. And so even if the remediation turns into a big number, the FAA is highly likely to fund it.
So that it also mentions the previous AR, I think it was when that was receiving a grant for $11.5 million from the FAA total 400,000. So I understand comes from that. Receiving money from the FAA. Is that 11.5 million? Is some of that money that they're able for that work, or is it additional?
That's totally different. That's totally different projects.
That's all we committed to.
Correct. That's totally different projects. This is a separate project.
The FAA has lots of different pots of money that they fund a variety of airport needs from. And property acquisition would be a different pot of money than would be capital projects, for instance. And even the capital projects come in different flavors and have different types of money. It's a big old bureaucracy, and there's lots of different ways to touch them. But it's a very generous bureaucracy if you're an airport like Merrillfield. And this will not compete against other airport requirements. This would be evaluated separately and, if approved, when approved, funded separately.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. I do have a comment about the amendment. I will propose to a constant this proposed amendment. And I think it is through runway protection zones or others. This directives regarding that. And municipal law department had some concerns when they saw this language as well. And I wondered if that may concern Part C, which should make it and go to green space. That language maybe goes a little far, but the FAA pretty much requires that non-compliant land uses are allowed in the RPC. If this language said something more along the lines of non-compliant land uses will be allowed in this parcel, non-compliant land uses in RPC, or even non-compliant land uses that would not require FAA. I'm not sure the exact language, but review and approval, because FAA has some categorical approved compliant uses, and those should be like irrigation, service road for the airport, maybe underground facilities, all lines. So that's development services and maybe soft a little bit. The language like allow compliant uses that don't require for the categorically approved compliant land uses. Limited to that, maybe part of that far. Is that something that would still be objectionable?
Our sense is that typically we would be uncomfortable with this level of directed management in an ordinance associated with this. But because it's in the runway protection zone, the notion that it's going to be used for anything else other than green space in the foreseeable future is acceptable to us. If we'd have said that, for instance, on the City Electric acquisition, we would have a different recommendation for the assembly. But in this case, in this parcel, we do not. We're comfortable with this outcome here. I'm taking guidance from Paul and Linda and Alex, and it goes against my grain. But for this parcel, on this day, it's fine. And we're not interested in, we don't need to create any further flexibility at this time. If we wanted to change the use of this, and we'd have to, number one, satisfy the FAA that the change was allowable in the runway protection zone, and two, we'd have to convince the assembly that it was good for the community generally. And I'm not sure there's a way to thread that needle other than green space right now, and so we're okay with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this house currently occupied? Is someone actually living there right now?
Correct. Mr. Sandy is
still living there?
Yeah. But he told us that again, he has a scheduled surgery, but he's deferring his surgery because of the money that is coming in. So the sooner that we can get this passed through, the sooner that he can get that.
You want the last word, and I'll ask this question?
Yeah, well, I just have a clarification for something that.
Okay, go ahead.
What Ms. Peterson, when you said about the acquisition, that this is the last one of the properties, I wanted to make sure that the record was clear that all we're talking about is to the east of Orca Street and to the south of the bar. That's the line. It's essentially Orca Street and over in this area. There's nothing contemplated, at least publicly, to the west of Orca Street. And should there be, that'd be a whole different conversation too.
Correct.
Agree more.
Right. And just for the record, I don't know if FAA is going to fund any areas that are not adjacent to the airport. On the master plan, it says that only lands that are adjacent to the airport, they are going to support that. Other than that.
But the dilemma there is that these properties become adjacent to the airport or they become the airport.
Because
and then,
they run reputation, so.
but then they are the airport, and then the next properties become adjacent to the airport over time, and then the next properties become adjacent as the acquisitions continue. And so, again, that's the consideration. I want to make really clear that it's Orca Street right there. It's not to the west of Orca Street. It's to the east of Orca Street, and just those last two properties there.
Yeah. Quick, what's this property zone?
I think right now it's residential.
So it's on, would you rezone?
No.
No. How do you keep track of this? I mean, this piece of property is separately platted from this bigger piece. So 30 years from now, everybody's gone and someone Merrifield wants a development. How do they know, folks, you have to keep a green space? Is it noted on the plat?
It will not be noted on the plat. The ordinance will be the prevailing document. Frankly, it will go probably in your master plan or
Right.
updates in the master plan. So it will be a Merrifield document that we track. But normally when we acquire these, unless there's a reason we don't replat them into the rest of the airport, unless there is some specific reason to do it, and we normally don't rezone them either. Today, there's no functional reason to do either one of those. But the master plan and all of their documents will note that will be reserved as green space.
Right, thanks. Anything else from anyone?
One last comment. It was the will of the chair that Cottonwoods be listed first. And so in the ordinance, the Cottonwoods are listed on behalf of
Thank
the
you.
chair. So,
Do you want to make any advice on this?
Let's move it forward. Approval.
So there's a work session scheduled on this.
Oh, is there really?
Tomorrow afternoon. Lord knows I love a work session, but I'm wondering whether it remains necessary.
I don't recall seeing that.
I don't remember seeing
It's
it.
new, it was added. It is on the, I think it's 12 or 1
It's 1
o'clock.
o'clock, 1 to 1:30.
Yeah, there's a 30-minute work session scheduled.
Just from my
So,
perspective, Mike, I see no reason for it.
you're not going to get any objection from the administration, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to clarify. So, can I assume, Mr. Chairman, then that you'll work with the clerk to cancel that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that was our intent, on one or the other.
I think so.
Okay, so any opposition? So we'll move this forward with recommendation to approve it with the amendment. Okay, good. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good job, Chris.
I should have said I get to help.
What's that?
I should have said I get to help.
I have a chainsaw copy.
That's in there now.
Thank you.
I'm going to start the Society for the Protection of the Cottonwoods. Did you hear me, John? I've decided after this I'm going to start the Society for the Protection of the Cottonwoods.
You would be very lonely.
I'll lose my election if I do that.
Okay. So moving on to 2017-08, which is change to Title 21. Sonic, you want to give us what this is and why we're doing this?
Sure. The new Title 21 eliminated the ability for properties that are already zoned PC district to develop absent a master plan. Old Title 21 allowed those properties that are already zoned PC to develop under the R8 standards without going through the master planning process. But that provision was actually in the intent section of the PC district under the old Title 21. Tom and Dave went back through all of the iterations in the, code change process, and Tom says the progression of the PC district over the course of 5 drafts of the 12-year process indicates that the district changed and at one point disappeared, then was brought back in the form ultimately adopted. It is our belief that when the district was brought back, that the R8 allowed use provision from the old code was overlooked. That provision was an intent statement in the old code, which may have caused it to be overlooked and omitted. So we believe it was an unintentional. mistake in the adoption of the new code, and so this amendment seeks to accept that.
So can I clarify, so the old code didn't explicitly say in the code wording that you should defer to R8. It was just the intent statement above said in this section of plan community development, and absent the master plan, you can develop an R8. It was in the intent section.
It was in the intent section, yeah.
And we zapped all the intent sections.
Right, under the old Title 21, the intent sections were allowed to be used as regulatory. Under the new Title 21, they're not allowed to be regulatory statements. It did go, the Planning and Zoning Commission was noticed, and they voted unanimously to send it to the Assembly without the vote.
Okay. Any comment?
I just add on to what Son said, the R8 district is compatible with rural areas. It's a 4-acre minimum lot. It's a pretty large lot, and you have to have a 300-foot width, minimum width to the lot. So it's not higher density. So that's my only comment.
This primarily will affect my district, and I haven't heard any opposition to it. Frankly, I think this makes it a little easier for people.
It does.
So I can't imagine we're going to get any pushback from Chief Eagle River. When I saw this, it didn't raise my dander. I'm very sensitive. So I personally think the more tools we give property owners to develop their properties, the better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would this affect property in your district? I mean, 4 acres is pretty big, but there are some undeveloped parcels up there on the hillside.
Yeah, no, the same thing there. So, but the thing that jumped out on me is not, I mean, just like Babbitt, but who would want to default to R8 standards? I mean, typically, if you do a planned community development, I'm thinking Independence Park. Planned community development, you have smaller lot sizes and you put amenities and so on to make up for it. So here you have planned community development, 4 acres. I mean, why would anyone do that? Are people
Someone
doing
who
it?
has a large tract of land that is currently zoned PC and maybe wants to just put a single house on it may want to default to the R8 standards rather than go through the master plan process. Right now, the way code is, if I had, that acreage and I wanted to just build a single family home, I would have to go to planning and go through the master plan process for my single family home, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So that's what this amendment is seeking to avoid. Yeah.
Where are these, that's a rare zoning.
Eagle River is a large tract of land, quite a lot of area in Eagle River that is PC. It's pretty rare in the Anchorage Bowl area. We have some down by the port, south of the port in that railroad area. There's some, I think there were a very few up on Hillside. I don't know, some of those have been rezoned, but yeah, primarily, like Dave said, it would be that large area in Eagle River.
So most, say, I don't know Eagle River so much, but if it were a big hillside, it was probably R6 or 10, something like that. So they could, at some point, someone had a rezone to planned community development because they had lofty, desired, probably higher density. Like, why would you do that?
No, most of the existing ones were done under the area-wide rezones, and they were in kind of transition type of areas that they weren't sure what direction they were going to develop in, and that was, how the PC district, along with the T district, those were both looked at that way at the time of the area-wide rezones.
So, sorry. So, because I'm not aware of them on the hillside, so they must be there.
Pretty far from places.
Yeah.
But so would they be subject to the hillside district plan, which is saying, 0 to 1 DUA or something? Like where?
How that would interact with the hillside district plan is if they undertook a master plan to do some density, they'd be asking for an entitlement from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and maybe Assembly might go that far, and that would be one of the criteria for evaluating master plan would be to look at the adopted plan, district plan. But the converse of it, if they just developed under the RA, it would be coincided with the Hillside District plan. I mean, as it stands, yeah. Because it's less than one dwelling unit per acre, and that's what regions that would have PC would be designated in the land use plan map. It just says light blue, less than one dwelling unit per acre. Of course, you have that because it's one dwelling unit for every 4 acres.
Right.
I was just gonna ask, in my mind, what I'm thinking of for the PC land that I know of, or I think I know of, is it primarily owned by Okluna? A lot of it, I think,
A lot of it is.
And Okluna, typically, when they develop, they're gonna go through the whole master planning process, just because they have so many homes that they're dealing with, and, you know, just the way they develop. But, I'm thinking of, I don't think it's probably PC zoned, but I'm thinking of a couple of realtors that I know that own 20 to 100 acres out there. It's probably not done PC, but I could absolutely see one of them if it was. Just putting one house on it. I mean, I personally looked at a parcel that was 20 acres, I don't know the zoning, and I wouldn't put anything other than one house on it. So, I can see people, especially in my district, doing something like that.
So what prompted this now?
It was actually a question from somebody who has a large tract of land and wanted to put its own PC, and they want to put one house on it. And they were told, you have to go through the master plan. And then that was, Dave received that question, and then he forwarded the question to me, and started looking into it. Yeah.
Okay. So he's waiting?
I assume he is, yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
I hope this goes forward with the assembly with full approval and confidence of the committee. I think it just makes sense.
I think it's just a technical change. We've talked about it many times that we knew when we implemented the new Title 21 there were going to be things that slipped through the cracks, and this looks like it was one of them.
Okay, so we want to make a recommendation.
Recommendation to approve it to the assembly.
Second.
Any opposition?
No, and so I want to thank you for bringing this forward. You know, there's going to be lots of stuff that we don't catch that people bring up that we run into, and we appreciate you guys doing that.
You want a house on 20 acres, I think.
Well, I have one on 27 in Willow, but.
I think our default is if we have changes to Title 21, we'll run it through this for both. So just as you come up with some plan on it. This it looks major. It has lots of. It's an odd thing, though.
Yeah.
We'll discuss it a bit.
Which expertise we get that, so.
Okay, anything else?
Is this in general, this old business?
Sure, why not?
Well, it's not really old. This is a new question, and this is something I wanted to bring up. I've talked individually, I didn't think about it, but I wanted to bring it up in front of the whole committee. As we're looking at marijuana separation distances, I received a phone call from somebody who was selling a property to somebody who wanted to start a marijuana business. And when they sold the property, they said to him flat out, "Hey, listen, you know, you're not going to be able to have a marijuana shop here because you're on the property line of a school. You're too close." And so I was contacted, as I said, by the seller, who was very concerned because they were going forward anyways, and they were building all these funky fences. And Ryan and I had talked about it. They were building all these funky fences, so when planning went out to measure it, they'd have to like go through a maze. And so that's something that I want to really be conscientious about. And this is why I started getting really militant when these guys asked me on what separation distance is, and Ryan knows I'm concerned about this particular parcel. Because I don't think it's going to pass the red face test with the public at all. If we have property lines that are literally abut a school, and then somebody's created, you know, this Alice in Wonderland maze to get around the separation distance. And I'm just putting it out there, just so you know, if this comes up and they're within 3 feet, but it's been measured some funky way, I'm probably going to question it a lot.
Well, we have a trigger there. We have 200 feet as a crow flies, right?
Yeah, that's what he pointed out.
And that was why.
Yeah, Ryan knows exactly what parcel I'm talking about. So.
Planning staff has gone out there and done measurements, and we have not been able to confirm that the 500-foot separation distance is right.
No, it's not. Is it in his district?
Of course it's.
It's either in West Acres or it's
right at Northeast. No marijuana shops in my district. They have to go down.
I can't remember what his district is. It's not in mine.
It's near Lake Lotus 88, so I'm not sure.
Well, that's in mine.
Yep. There you go. But you know, it's just one of those things. We've been, I think, really fair with a lot of these places, and we haven't tried to stick it to anybody, and we've been fair with everybody. And there's been a lot of business owners that have gone in and searched high and low and found properties and put a lot of money in specifically so they could meet the requirements. And to have some people come in and try to like sneak it past us, I'm not trying to, you know, get anybody or sabotage anybody. I just want, you know, I think we need to have everybody on level playing field and not try to undermine the intent of the law, which was a separation distance.
Well, and I think the marijuana business community would probably not think this is a good idea to allow this person to try to slip by on a technicality when they've been jumping through the mazes for years to try to follow the law. So I don't think that we'll get any pushback from them. This guy, he's blowing a lot of his own money, and it's not going to work out in the end. But you know, those are the choices people make.
Exactly, and they were told before they bought it that from the previous owner that they didn't think they met it. So, you know, it's pretty assumed for all the rest.
I was going to mention that you could straight distance, but it's
I believe we're discussing the same property. We can talk after.
Yeah, we are.
It's from a child care center, and they do meet the 200 feet, but they do not, from our perspective at this point, meet the 500-foot short track pedestrian route. We have not been able to confirm that it is 500 feet or over.
And that 500 feet is crowflies, right?
Shortest practical.
Pedestrian.
But for the drug-free school zone.
Well, the drug-free school zone is a federal requirement.
But that's 1,000. But I thought we had wording in there. We had two things. Is one is you look at if it's 200 feet, and the crowflies from a protected category, no go. If it's 500 feet as a crowflies from a school, that would be a drug-free school zone school, then it's no go. Then you do the lot.
It would be a 500 feet short practical pedestrian route, but it's measured from lot line to lot line. And then for other protected land uses, it would be from the front door of the establishment to the lot line, or front door of the establishment to main public entrance protected land use. So it gets a bit complicated.
I have a question for Dean because I'm not really familiar with the assembly processes. My area of expertise is with the Planning and Zoning Commission. But my question is does the assembly, if it were to decide to deny a special land use permit for marijuana application, then does it need to make findings or give a reason for the denial in order to avoid lawsuits? Or, I mean, what is, when the Planning and Zoning Commission denies a conditional use permit, it makes findings, and then the decision is appealable by the applicant. But if the assembly took the step of denying one of these marijuana cases, if the applicant didn't want to accept that, what is the assembly's guidance from legal on how to deny things, and you know, do they need to give a reason?
Because it's expressly in code the traffic reasons. But yeah, the legal position should always, any government body should always give reasons to the plan, you know, the application for a license or any other sort. Just to develop the administrative record if it's challenged or appealed.
Because I ask because if the assembly denied such an application because they believed that it didn't meet the required separation distance, but in fact technically they do, then it seems like the applicant may say, well, I do meet code because with this fence I meet the separation distance of 502, I have 502 feet, I only need 500. But if the assembly uses that as a reason to deny it, it's still too close. I just want the assembly to have the tools to make good findings that stand up to being sued or in court.
There's a catch-all phrase in codes and it says it's not in the public interest. So, you know, our own fee technically it means it, but you know, look at their intent. That they trying to design some pedestrian route against it at 502. Maybe that's not in the public interest.
Right. That's what I was going to say is, unlike planning and zoning where their basis, and because you don't want your decision to be arbitrary or capricious, right? So you basically, it's the same thing when we do conflicts of interest. I try to lay foundation so we know we've considered things. And the assembly, unlike any other body, has the ability to say, you know, okay, these people might in fact meet all regulations and requirements, but it's not in the public interest to have you here. We did that when we closed down the Spirits of Alaska on Gamble, right? They met code, and in my opinion, I looked at it, I'm like, they meet everything, but the assembly made the decision that it's not in the public's interest to have an alcohol distribution place right there, and so they were closed. Now again, I think in this particular case, or in any case where we find someone who maybe might have a negative impact on a neighborhood, maybe it's too close to a residential, whatever it is, the assembly can just say it's not in the best interest of the public. And beyond that, they can appeal it, but they have to go to appeal it to the court.
They can appeal to the marijuana control board. It's got to go local courts.
I would add that bar is lower if they haven't yet opened the door, right? If they've never been licensed to operate, it isn't the same standard as if we had granted them a license. That would be a higher bar of kind of required finding or some other element. I think it's pretty clear that they reserve the right to
Who wrote the ability for us to have conditions in anybody's marijuana license?
We can suspend, revoke, amend, or we can just deny if we feel it's not.
But it's been interest.
Great, well, thanks for answering the question. Yeah, I was curious about that.
Tell me where this one's at, Amy.
88th and we'll go through it after. I just didn't want to have 5 conversations with people because I didn't want to get into a potential serial meeting issue. That's why I wanted to say it in public on the record. But I wanted the committee to be fully aware that, you know, there may be times when people come and they try creative ways to get past the planning department, and you know, Ryan and their group is doing an amazing job, and I know it's tough, but I wanted them to know ahead of time that this is on my radar too. So. Measure 10 times.
It's a different matter, but similar, related.
Actually, let me real quick. So, Mandy, you're in a case like this where they come with an application. What do you do with it? You look at it and go, boy, this is not quite right.
I look at the licensing portion of it. So that if it catches my eye and I have a question about it, I will check with planning on some stuff. But typically, that's kind of their wheelhouse, and that's their call on those. That's not, the distance isn't really something that I monitor with the licensing review.
We get those checklists though, and they make pretty good notes.
And the application is submitted to planning.
Oh, it first goes to you, and then that's good, because you hate to have them go through and think they're on a roll or something. Okay. So what would you do? You got this. You look at one that looks fishy. What do you say to these people?
We typically, when we get the first submittal and we review it for application completeness, if we believe that there's a standard that they cannot meet, we will address that in the application completeness letter with some sort of notice at the bottom or a disclaimer or a bullet point or a star saying, you know, please be advised that we feel at this time you do not meet the separation distance, or I think we've done that on a couple of submittals thus far.
We can't stop them from applying,
exactly,
but we want to protect them as much as possible by warning them. Because we we're people, and we just don't want people to spend money on something that we're going to recommend denial for.
Yeah, and as soon as Mandy gets notice that they've submitted or initiated a state application, she has a standard email that she sends out stating that they have the option of meeting with us for a pre-application meeting. Thus far, I've had 2 takers on that, which surprises me. But both of those people that came in, we were able to give them all the full rundown of everything that they need to do and give a full evaluation of the property they had in mind. And they're sitting a lot better and coming out with a much better application than we have.
Thanks for doing that for us.
It makes the process so
We had
much
one
easier.
yesterday and one of those prelim meetings, and then we have another one this afternoon at 1 o'clock too.
Correct.
So if they are not really applying yet, but they're just doing due diligence on a purchase, do you respond, maybe they have a 30-day window for due diligence, and do you respond fast enough for them to be in that 30-day window?
Yes, I do get inquiries from the two main attorneys in town that have been representing a lot of these marijuana applicants, and they'll just say, sometimes they send me a couple properties, sometimes they send me just one, and they say, do you feel that it will work at this time? And I have a pretty standard message that I send out saying, you know, planning department at this time with the resources available to us, we feel that separation distance is met or separation distance is not met. And if it's not met, I state what, you know, protected land use is close to them, and or if there's any other issues with the property that we can see right off the bat.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So my question is, should this committee make a recommendation to applicants that they go through the preliminary meeting process with the planning department? Is that something that we want to be proactive about, to advise?
Every applicant already gets it.
They already get
already. We've already done that.
Yeah.
All right.
By the time they get here.
You would think that would, I mean, if I was thinking about spending $250,000 or whatever, I'd certainly have a little meeting for
We
it,
get
you know.
notice, the clerk's office gets notice and planning that an application for a license has been submitted to the state. And then we notify them, hey, we've got, you know, we know that you've applied, you need to have a prelim meeting, or you should, you know. But they'll often call us to start the investigation or due diligence. I mean, that's probably the number one thing they should be checking, separation distance right to the bat.
There.
When we started this marijuana process, we put that into place, let the people know ahead of time, you can call Brandy, and we're happy to help you go through this. We don't want people spending a piece of $250,000. The problem is too often, they see money at the end of this goal and they hear nothing else, and that's their problem.
Okay, anything else on that? Chris, you had a comment?
Yeah, so last week, or 2 weeks ago, we approved renewal licenses, and there was some discussion about one of the licensees.
Arctic Herbery.
I was on a drive by their business, and it appears to me that they're operating with an illegal sign. No, it's been out there for 2 weeks, and
You're not allowed to have temporary signs,
and
code
so,
violation.
it's, to me, it's,
Soundboard.
and it's gotta be properly fine, you know, if it just said parking or something.
Should have some Green Star.
Yeah, and so to me, it just seems like, we might want to send somebody to pay him a visit.
I'll introduce you to my friend Jack.
Jack Frost.
So, you know,
We'll walk out together.
I was one in support of his license, and I just want to be sure that everybody knows we have the fair rules for everybody. And he deserves a visit from higher authority, so.
So I drive by there probably at least once or twice a month and haven't seen that.
It's
So,
been out for
yeah.
about, just since the last meeting, I went by to look and just see his.
See, and it's not even me this time.
Well, I'm doing that in good faith to the process.
Well,
and all the hard work people.
I used to have a sandwich board sign for my restaurant, and it worked very, very well.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, it would come up missing,
Yep.
and I'd have to make a new one.
You didn't put marijuana leaf on it.
Right.
No, I
You
didn't.
could just say parking. I mean, there are a lot of ways
Yeah.
to get around it, but and it's unfair to all the other businesses who are complying with the laws, who have written.
Well, he could actually put Arctic Herbery parking.
No, that he couldn't do
That-
because
that
of the
wouldn't be
state
legal.
sign law. Your signs have to be attached to your building.
That's right.
But-
Has to be on the front door.
So I have done my homework on this, and it just seems to me from all directions, he's kind of breaking the rules, and it's
Not the first time.
Right.
Any portable signage is actually against it.
He tries to curb it as close as he
We had a
can.
big discussion about this not too long ago when we were going back through some of our revisions on the marijuana codes. And, you know, we said no, other businesses can't have temporary signs, which consistency is important.
And it's a concern of the downtown businesses. You've heard from them, and they're continuing to me that they're afraid people are going to start putting out marijuana sandwich boards all over the downtown. And if we're allowing it in Dick's district, then we ought to, you know.
It's really not my district. It's in West Anchorage, but I take responsibility for it.
You know, so.
But sandwich signs are allowed downtown, right?
Only if they're in the right of way, get the right of way permit.
and I'm certain this sign is not permitted.
No, it's not down.
I'm texting Jack as we talk.
How are you? Tell them we'll be in at the front counter in 5 minutes.
Okay, anything else? All right, good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Adjourn?